I stood outside Callaway and Finch with a manila envelope pressed to my chest, the kind you only carry when you're done pretending to be gentle. The hallway smelled like lemon cleaner. My hand shook, not from age, but from thunder under my ribs. I knocked once, twice. No answer. I looked at the envelope and almost laughed. Inside was proof that the ground under my son's life was not solid at all. 2 months earlier, nobody saw this coming. That morning in Savannah had started soft. The porch fan clicked, the Spanish moss in the oaks swayed like gray lace, and my coffee steamed in a chipped blue mug I've had since nursing school. I dialed my son to ask about his wedding plans. He'd been hinting for weeks that a big day was near. I expected dates, venues, maybe a pleading request for help with the bill. Instead, a woman's voice answered. Bright. Polished. A little too sweet. We got married yesterday, she said. Just for special people. My heart didn't break in one clean piece. It splintered. I swallowed, thanked her, and hung up before my voice shook. I sat very still and listened to the fan tick. The house I raised my boy in felt suddenly too quiet, like it had pushed its breath down into the floorboards. If you're watching this, tell me, would you confront them now, or wait? Drop your choice below. Because that moment taught me something, silence can be sharper than a knife. I took my coffee to the kitchen window and let old memories crawl in. I saw my boy at 8, freckled, falling asleep on a stack of spelling cards while I ironed scrubs for my night shift. I saw the time I sold my little car to pay his tuition deposit in Atlanta. I saw every overtime shift I took through flu season to keep the lights on. You work, you love, you stretch. Then one sentence from a stranger slices through all that history and calls you not special. I didn't cry. I cleaned. I wiped the stove, swept the porch, watered the basil. I kept moving until the sting cooled into focus. Something about the tone, the rush, the secrecy, none of it sat right. My son is impulsive, yes, but he is also loyal. He wouldn't cut me out on his own. Someone had pressed fast forward. That night I pulled a folder from my desk. Deed papers. Not copies, originals. Months earlier my son had begged me to co-sign on a brownstone in Brooklyn. He wanted a start, a footprint. I agreed, on one condition: until he was settled, the deed would stay in my name. It was meant to be my surprise gift for the wedding day, keys tied with a ribbon, a blessing for their future. I pictured tears, a hug, maybe a dance in that narrow kitchen with tall windows. Instead, I stood alone in Savannah with silence for company. Can you feel it? The porch light flickered like it knew a secret. I drove to the river and sat on a bench, letting the wind tangle my hair. In the dark water I saw a plan take shape. I would not beg for crumbs. I would not raise my voice. I would let the paper speak. And I would watch. People show you who they are when they think you're powerless. A week passed. No call from my son. No invitation. Just a tightness in my chest that felt like holding a plank too long. On the 7th day, my phone lit up. Same sweet voice. Same sugar. A request for money I will tell you about soon. I said 6 words that set the line, didn't I tell you? She laughed like chimes and asked, tell me what? I didn't answer. I let the silence climb between us like ivy and then I hung up. That's when I sealed the envelope I'm holding now. Inside, pictures, printouts, proof. I left Savannah before sunrise and took the first flight north. If you're still with me, remember this line for later: respect isn't owed, it's earned. I raised my hand to knock again. The latch clicked from inside. The door opened. I braced for the truth at last. 2 months earlier, the day still smelled of salt from the marsh when the clock above my stove skipped a beat, like it knew trouble was on its way. I balanced my blue mug on the counter and dialed my son's number, humming to keep my nerves steady. A bright female voice answered instead. This is Marielle, she said, crisp and polite, like a receptionist who never forgets to smile. I froze. I'd only met her once, a fleeting handshake at a crowded art fair. "Good morning," I managed. "Is my son around?" A pause, then, "We got married yesterday. Just for special people." The words slammed down like a cast-iron skillet. Special people. My breath caught, and the quiet of the kitchen stretched thin as wire. I forced a brittle congratulations and asked where my boy was. "He's busy," she replied, a silky edge sliding beneath the sweetness. "If you were in my shoes, would you push for details or let silence do the work? Tell me in the comments, because silence can be louder than a scream." I hung up and stared at the steam curling off my coffee. Images of late nights returned, spelling tests spread across the table, my hand on his back while he drifted to sleep, the endless overtime shifts at the clinic to cover tuition. All that history, shoved aside in a single sentence. But something else scratched at me, too fast, too secret, too perfectly staged. My son can be impulsive, but not cruel. Someone had pressed the accelerator, and it wasn't him. I pulled open the cedar desk drawer and slid out a thick folder labeled Brooklyn Project. Inside lay the original deed to the brownstone he loved. I'd agreed to help with the down payment on one condition: the property stayed in my name until a formal transfer after the wedding. I'd imagined surprising them with the paperwork wrapped in a silver ribbon, a quiet, motherly blessing. Now that gift felt more like armor. That night, the house seemed to lean in around me. The porch light flickered like it held a secret. I wrote a list on a yellow pad: utilities, insurance, legal contacts, old nursing shift habits never die. Each bullet point steadied me. The days dragged. I baked bread I didn't want, swept the porch twice a day, and walked the river trail where the cypress knees jut up like warning fingers. Neighbors waved, I smiled like nothing was wrong. But under the calm, a current pulled me forward. On the 7th evening, my phone rang again. Same voice. Honey over glass. "The rent is overdue," she said, as if reading a grocery list. "Did you transfer it?" The audacity lit a fuse. She thought I'd forgotten the deed in my desk and the signatures in my safe. "Didn't I tell you?" I asked. Silence, sharp enough to taste. Then a laugh, thin and nervous. "Tell me what?" I let the pause stretch until the porch clock chimed. "We'll talk soon," I said, and ended the call. That was the moment I chose the quiet path of precision. No arguments, no pleading. I would let the paper speak when the time was right. I placed the deed and supporting documents in a thick envelope and set it on the hall table beside my travel bag. Respect isn't inherited. It's claimed. And I was just getting started. I woke before dawn, the air thick with the smell of last night's rain. The city outside my window was still asleep, but my thoughts were wide awake and restless. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table where every scratch in the wood carries a story: school projects, birthday candles, late-night homework sessions. Each mark reminded me of sacrifices stacked like unpaid bills. Do you ever replay old memories like a movie you can't turn off? Tell me in the comments if you've been there, because that morning, every scene begged for a second look. There was the time I sold my tiny hatchback so my boy could pay his first semester tuition. The winter we shared one space heater to keep the lights bill manageable. I even remembered a Christmas when we skipped gifts so he could buy the science kit he wanted. Those memories used to fill me with quiet pride. Now they burned. I grabbed the brownstone folder again, the weight of the deed like a promise in my hands. I thought about calling him, demanding answers, but something stopped me. Anger is loud, strategy is stronger. Instead, I phoned a trusted friend from my clinic days, Janelle, the kind who doesn't rattle easily. I told her enough to draw a map but left the heart of it tucked away. "Let them show who they are," she said. "Paperwork is power. Don't give that away." Her words settled over me like a quilt. By afternoon I'd contacted Callaway and Finch. My attorney, a sharp mind named Harold, agreed to review every document. I scanned and sent the deed while the rain hammered the windows. "Everything checks out," he confirmed. You alone control the property. Do you want to update the lease? Not yet, I said. Let's wait and watch. Because deep down, I sensed the real storm hadn't even started. 7 days after that first cruel call, the phone buzzed again. Same name flashing across the screen. Hi, Marielle chirped, sweet as peach pie. The rent is overdue. Did you transfer it? Her tone was syrupy, but underneath it I heard steel, like she expected me to fall in line. I almost smiled. Didn't I tell you? Silence. Then a forced laugh. Tell me what? I let the pause stretch until it felt like a held breath. We'll talk soon, I said, and ended the call. Friends, what would you have done right there? Spill the truth or keep her guessing? Drop your thoughts below. After hanging up, I drove to the riverside park and watched gulls dive for shrimp. The tide moved in slow, deliberate waves, and I took it as a sign. That evening I wrote a single sentence in my journal: patience is a weapon. Next morning I met Harold at his office. We discussed the lease termination notice and options to secure the building. He slid papers across the polished desk. Once you sign these, he said, their tenancy is on a clock. I didn't sign yet. I wanted them to sweat first. As I left the office, a thin drizzle started. I tilted my face up and let the rain fall. Power can feel like sunlight even on a gray day. Saturday arrived bright and unassuming. I watered the porch plants and waited. By noon, I'd filed a quiet request with the county clerk to flag any title inquiries on the brownstone. It was a simple safeguard, but it gave me the calm of a locked door. Late that night, my phone buzzed with a message from Janelle. You might want to see this. Attached was a grainy photo, my daughter-in-law stepping out of the brownstone with a tall stranger, his arm around her waist. The streetlight framed them like a spotlight. My pulse didn't race. It slowed, deliberate. I saved the photo, printed it, and slid it into the manila envelope beside the deed. Evidence, quiet and heavy. Have you ever felt that cold clarity when a suspicion turns into proof? Tell me how you handled it, because I simply sat back and planned. The next morning I booked a flight to New York. I packed a single carry-on, legal papers, a change of clothes, and the envelope that had become my shield. Before boarding, I texted Harold, prepare the termination notice. Timing is everything. As the plane lifted, Savannah's marshes shrank to green lace beneath the clouds. I gripped the armrest and whispered a promise. You built your life on my foundation. I'm taking the ground back. Some people think revenge is loud. I know better. It's a quiet, steady heartbeat that never misses a beat. The cab dropped me at the corner of Dean Street and Quiet Pride. Brownstone steps rose like a spine, steady and sure, and the windows blinked with the kind of shine you get when someone thinks appearances solve everything. I stood under the maple tree a full minute before climbing the steps. It isn't fear that makes me pause in moments like that, it's calculation. Timing is a tool. Breath is a tool. Even a tremble can be a tool if you let it. I rang the bell with a soft touch and eased my shoulders inward, letting my bag hang heavy from one hand. When Marielle opened the door, her smile arrived before her eyes did. Well, she said, surprise thinning her voice. You didn't say you were coming. I'm not good at announcements, I answered, airy as lace. Figured I'd bring a pot of gumbo and some hugs. I didn't bring gumbo. I brought paper, which is much spicier. The entry smelled like citrus cleaner and something floral that tried too hard. A framed engagement photo sat on a little table though they'd skipped the ceremony. In it, my son looked dazed in a way that made me want to pull him out of the picture and set him on my lap again with a grilled cheese sandwich. You're looking tired, I told her, steadying my hand on the banister like a woman finding her balance. Newlywed life is a marathon. Busy, she said, her smile returning to its practiced shape. We're busy. There it was again, the word that hides sins. Is my boy home? I asked. Not right now. Of course he wasn't. I let my knees bend as if they didn't like the climb and sank onto the second step. "I'll wait," I said. "If that's all right." She didn't want me there. I could feel it in the way she watched the street instead of my face, as if waiting for someone else to appear. So I became a soft presence, a cardigan on a chair, easy to ignore until you need warmth. I asked about paint colors and where she found that little brass lamp. I complimented the hydrangeas in the window box and asked whether the upstairs radiator banged in winter. Small questions, harmless as dandelion fluff. Meanwhile, I counted keys on her ring and clocked the brand of the smart lock on the door. When my son finally arrived, 2 hours later, he looked surprised and relieved, like a man who found a life jacket on a boat he didn't realize was sinking. He hugged me hard. I hugged harder. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered against his cheek. His eyes darted to her. "It was fast." "Fast isn't the same as cruel," I said. I made sure it sounded like an old woman's scold, not the line it truly was, a scalpel. We sat at the narrow kitchen table beneath tall windows that let in a slant of pale light. I asked about work, the neighborhood, the grocery store on the corner that sells peaches in July like they're gold. My son talked. She arranged and rearranged a vase of tulips that didn't need arranging. "Rent's due," she said finally, turning to him in a way that made the sentence a command. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, could you?" "I thought you two might handle that now," I said, letting a tremor travel through my hand. "My accounts are a little tangled this week." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "We were counting on what you promised." "Promised?" I echoed, as if I'd forgotten any such thing. Frail can be a costume, but amnesia is a hat you only wear to parties you intend to leave early. I stood, swaying just enough to make my son reach out and steady me. "I'll be nearby for a day or two," I said. "Wanted to see your faces." I glanced at the front door. "And your locks." I smiled the warmest smile I own. "Always change your locks when you start a new life. It keeps out the past." Her eyes flicked toward the hallway closet where the toolbox lives. I filed that away. As I left, the smart lock chirped with a sound that would soon be irrelevant. On the sidewalk, I pulled out my phone and texted 3 words to Harold: green light. Proceed. "Friends, here's a fork in the road for you. Confront them with the deed right now or keep playing small and let the trap set itself? Say which path you take." I already knew mine. The sweetest victories are the quiet ones, the kind that look like accidents to everyone but you. I walked to the corner deli and bought a ginger ale I didn't want. I sat at a metal table and watched the stoop from across the street. 15 minutes later, a man in a navy jacket turned the corner, slowed at the steps, and checked his phone. He didn't go inside. He didn't need to. He waited. And she came out. Not a hug this time. Just a quick glance both ways and a whisper close to his ear. Their bodies leaned in together like a secret they were tired of carrying. Then she went back in, and he walked away. I took a picture I didn't need. The better proof was already on paper. Tomorrow, I told myself, the first domino falls. And when it falls, it won't make a sound, just a click only the careful can hear. I've learned buildings hold memories the way quilts hold warmth. This brownstone, with its carved lintels and stubborn steps, has heard lullabies and arguments and the scrape of furniture when somebody tries to push a couch up a stair that refuses to help. It also hears whispers. That afternoon, I went looking for one. The super, a barrel-chested man called Gus who fixed things before they broke, was polishing the handrail when I came back. I greeted him like any mother eager to brag about her boy. "My son just moved in," I said, letting a smile crease my cheeks. "I'm the meddling kind. You'll see too much of me." "Good to meet you," he said, warmth in his voice that didn't quite reach his eyes. He clocked everything, men like him always do. "You ever get door buzzers misbehaving?" I asked, tracing the brass plate with one finger. "Hate when family can't get in." "Batteries die," he said. Networks hiccup. I answered, as if networks were the weather. And neighbors? Any I should bake cookies for first? He grinned. Fourth floor musician. Second floor grad student. Garden apartment couple that never stops ordering packages. Any nurses? I asked. Up the block, said a voice from the steps. A woman in scrubs, dark hair pulled into a knot, eyes like she'd seen it all and was willing to see a little more, paused for breath. Name's Priya. You that boy's mom? I nodded. Guilty. She tilted her head. You want real talk? I never turn it down. The girl's got company when the boy isn't home. Not my business. But I figured you'd want eyes open. Silence isn't always quiet. Sometimes it thunders. I felt the roll of it in my chest and forced my voice light. Company like church friends? Priya's mouth made a rueful shape. Not that flavor. Gus coughed like a warning bell. We don't gossip here, he said. He meant it. But information has a way of finding its level, like water. I thanked them both, promised to bring cookies I had no intention of baking, and stepped back onto the sidewalk, heart steady. Proof isn't for gloating. It's for building the floor you stand on when the storm hits. That evening, I stood across the street again, far enough to be nobody, close enough to be a witness. The same man from yesterday returned. Navy jacket, quick feet, the posture of someone who moves through doorways he doesn't own. He didn't enter. He didn't have to. When she came out, their faces fit too easily near the stoop light. I didn't take a photo this time. Instead, I wrote down the time, the weather, the license plate of the ride he rattled away in. Paper, again. Always paper. Back at the hotel, I spread my documents across the desk like cards in a game I'd already learned to win. Deed. Insurance. Lease. Notice. I called Harold. Tomorrow, he said, we serve. I want the tone clean, I told him. No drama. Just dates and signatures. Understood. And the smart lock? I asked. I spoke with the vendor this afternoon. Ownership follows the account holder on record. He cleared his throat in a way that meant victory without confetti. That's you. I slept well for the first time in a week, the kind of sleep that comes when the gears finally mesh. Morning arrived with a gray sky and the smell of rain on hot brick. I wore a simple dress and flats that don't slip. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, Priya waved from the corner, holding a coffee the size of courage. You okay? She asked. Better than yesterday, I said. Good. She sipped. Because they're not. At 10 on the dot, a process server in a neat jacket walked up the steps and pressed the buzzer. When the door answered, he introduced himself as calmly as a librarian. Papers exchanged hands. A clock started. You could almost hear it. Across the street, I kept my face neutral. Inside, the word finally slid into place, leverage. Here's your moment to weigh in. If you were me, would you warn your son privately or let the papers speak first? Drop your take. I chose the latter, and it wasn't cold. It was protective. Sometimes the only way to break a spell is to show the mirror. At noon my phone buzzed. A text from my son, Mom, what is this? We need to talk. A second message from a number I knew too well, you've made a mistake. 2 different tones, 2 different truths. I typed one sentence and sent it to both, I'm at the cafe on the corner. When my boy arrived, he looked like a man waking from a dream, blinking against noon light. He slid into the booth, hands open. I touched his knuckles and felt the same bones I used to bandage when he tumbled from his bike. What is going on? He asked. I kept my gaze on him, not on the door where she appeared moments later, jaw tight, smile missing. She slid in beside him like a shadow that didn't ask permission. You're overstepping, she said to me. Am I? I asked, mild as milk. Or did I step back and let the truth walk forward? You don't own that place. I raised one finger and set my folder on the table. Check the deed, I said softly. Read the dates. My son reached for the papers with hands I recognized, capable, kind, shaking. He read. His face changed by degrees, like a sky caught between weathers. She glanced and tried to laugh, but the sound snapped halfway through. We can fight this, she told him. My friend knows a litigator. I folded my hands. You can always fight. The question is, what will it cost you? No one spoke. The cafe's espresso machine hissed like punctuation. Finally, my son whispered, Why didn't you tell me? I was saving it for your wedding gift, I said. And then I learned the gift wasn't invited. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the spell had thinned. Not broken, yet, but thinned. We need time, he said. Good, I answered. Because the clock just started. The afternoon slid by in a hush you only hear in cities, traffic murmurs, dishes clink, pigeons hold committee meetings on church steps. I walked, not to tire myself but to clear the fog of disappointment that wanted to settle in. Disappointment makes you sloppy. Focus makes you dangerous. I turned onto a side street where a bank branch sat glassy and confident. Months ago, when we arranged the purchase, I'd set up a temporary account for property expenses. I hadn't touched it since. I stepped inside and asked to speak with a manager. The manager, a woman with a braid like a rope down her back, pulled up the account and frowned. Unusual activity? I asked. She angled the screen so I could see. Small withdrawals, regular as a metronome, just under the threshold that triggers alerts. Every few days. ATM near the brownstone. Each transaction tagged with a card number I did not recognize. Can you freeze the card? I asked. Of course, she said. We'll issue a new one to the account holder on file. That would be me. Correct. There it was again, ownership like a spine. You don't have to wave it to stand tall with it. I thanked her and stepped back onto the sidewalk in time to feel my phone buzz. A message from Harold, smart lock transfer completed. New codes generated. Suggest implementing at 8 a.m. tomorrow for clean reset. My thumbs hovered. Do it, I replied. If you're following along, here's your checkpoint. Would you confront the withdrawals right now or let the freeze speak? I chose silence. The best teacher, sometimes. That evening, I sat in the hotel lobby with a legal pad and played a game I learned from Triage, Map the Bleeding. Where is it worst? Who needs pressure? Who needs air? I drew lines between transactions, dates, texts, photos, and faces. In the middle I wrote one word, motive. My son wants stability. She wants speed. The mystery man wants opportunity. And I want truth, which is sometimes the slowest drink in the world but the only one that quenches. At dawn, I slipped on walking shoes and circled the block while the city yawned awake. By 8, the lock codes rotated like a clock hand, quiet and final. I didn't feel triumph. I felt order. At 8:12, my phone rang. My son. Mom, our keys won't work. Really? I said, keeping my voice soft. Technology is fussy. We need the new code. Come to the cafe. When I arrived, he was already there, alone. His face carried a wrinkle I'd never seen, a small fold between the eyes that forms when you spend too long trying to make two truths fit. He slid into the booth and put both hands on the table like a man surrendering. I'm sorry, he said. The words cracked something in me I'd been holding together with tape. I reached for his wrist. Tell me what you're sorry for. For letting her push me to cut you out. For believing we could juggle bills with air. For not asking the questions I was afraid to hear answered. All three, I said. Good. We can work with honesty. He leaned in. There's more, he whispered. A man, Marielle said he's a consultant, has been advising her on assets. He wants her to leverage the building. Leverage, I repeated, tasting the metal in it. Did you sign anything? No, he said quickly. She brought documents once, but the names didn't match. I told her it felt wrong. Thank God for small breaks on bad hills. My phone chimed again. A message from an unknown number: you cannot do this. We have rights. The punctuation felt theatrical. I slid the phone across so my son could read. His face tightened. That's him, he said. The consultant. Name? He hesitated, then wrote it on a napkin. I tucked it under my palm like a magician who doesn't need to show the card to prove the trick is real. Listen to me, I said. Paper protects you. It protects everyone who behaves. People who want shortcuts fear paper. He nodded, eyes wet in a way that turned him 5 again for a second. I wanted to gather him up and carry him out of the city, but you can't lift a man to safety. You can only show him the steps and stand at the bottom with a hand out. We agreed to a plan. He would stay with a friend for 2 nights while I secured the building and sorted the accounts. He would not confront her. He would not escalate. He would leave the noise to me and the law. When he left, my legs shook the way they do after a long shift. I let the tremor pass and then called Harold. Next move? He asked. Freeze discretionary withdrawals tied to the property account, I said. Notify the bank that only invoices I approve will be paid. Done. And Harold, I added, draft a letter to the consultant. Short. Precise. 2 sentences: you have no standing. Any further attempt to manipulate this asset will be documented and forwarded to the district attorney. He exhaled a small laugh. Remind me never to owe you money. You don't, I said. You earn yours. By sunset, the city had turned copper at the edges. I walked past the brownstone one more time. The steps looked taller now, like a spine that had decided to be a sword. The front door blinked a polite green at the new code. I stood at the bottom and spoke under my breath so only the building could hear. We're going to make you a home again. Across the street, a car idled. The man in the navy jacket watched me with a smile that felt borrowed. He raised his hand like a toast and then drove off. Cliffhanger time: do you confront the man or let him keep circling until he trips? I slipped my hands into my pockets and chose patience. Predators love movement. They don't understand stillness that thinks. At 9:03 the next morning, the brownstone's buzzer droned like a mosquito. I could imagine the scene inside: a frantic search for the code, a flurry of calls, the uncomfortable realization that the system no longer recognized their authority, not because of malice, but because of math. Names match or they don't. My phone rattled across the nightstand. First my son, calm, because we had a plan. Then Marielle, sharp, because plans threatened hers. What did you do? She demanded. Maintenance, I said. These modern locks, they need love. Open this door. Happy to, I answered. Let's meet with paperwork. Stop playing games. I looked out the hotel window at a sky that thought about rain and decided against it. Games are for people who forgot the rules. She hung up. Seconds later, a text arrived from an unknown number: blunt, punctuation-free, bad move. I saved it with the other notes and tagged the timestamp. Paper, always. At 10, I met Harold in the lobby. He handed me a folder. Lease termination clocks now runs, he said. You've got compliance milestones lined up like fence posts. Good, I answered. Let's raise the fence. We walked to the building together. On the steps, I took a breath and pressed the code. The lock chirped. Inside, the air held the damp smell of yesterday's rain and the metallic hint of a plan underway. My heels whispered across the tiles. I felt like a woman walking into a room she'd built long ago and finally decided to decorate. At the second-floor landing, my son waited, eyes searching mine. He looked steadier. I nodded to him and turned to the door. Marielle stood just inside, arms crossed, voice pitched low enough to sound controlled and high enough to crack if someone breathed too hard. "You can't just." "I can," I said. "But I won't, if everyone behaves." "Behaves?" The word snapped. "The lease requires payment in good faith," Harold said, stepping forward. "Your failure to meet both has triggered notice." She glared at him like he was furniture daring to be expensive. "We'll get our own counsel." "Please do," he said pleasantly. "Good counsel will tell you exactly what I just did." She turned to my son. "You're really letting this happen?" He swallowed. "I'm letting the truth happen." Something in her eyes hardened like sugar that didn't dissolve. She pushed past us and clattered down the stairs, phone to her ear. A door slammed below. "Breathe," I told my boy. He obeyed. We stepped into the apartment. The kitchen looked staged, fruit bowl with perfect lemons, cookbook open to a page no one had splattered, a white candle burned down just enough to imply use. I ran a hand over the counter and felt grit. Perfect is often dusty if you look close. "Pack what you need for 2 nights," I said. "I'll have a locksmith reinforce the deadbolt and a contractor check the windows." "You think she'll come back with a consultant?" he asked. "I think noise travels in packs. Let's make the house deaf to it." By noon, a locksmith named Ori, thin, cheerful, fast, had reinforced the deadbolt and explained the hardware like a teacher with a favorite student. A contractor checked the back windows and left an estimate for a repair no one would argue with. I signed both invoices and filed the copies in my folder. At 2, the downstairs buzzer screamed again. I checked the security monitor. Marielle stood with a navy jacket man beside her. He smiled at the camera like a game show host. "Don't answer," I told my son. The buzzer kept screaming. Finally, silence. A minute later, my phone pinged. An email arrived from a law firm I'd never heard of demanding immediate restoration of access and threatening a restraining order. Harold skimmed it, snorted softly, and typed a 3-sentence reply: "Access is not denied. Legal occupants have code. Ownership attached. Please review the deed before wasting the court's time." At 4, the building settled into that afternoon lull where sunlight turns tired and birds test their evening songs. I brewed tea on the stovetop and set a cup before my son. "Do you hate me?" he asked suddenly, voice small. I blinked fast because tears have their own gravity. "I don't know how to hate you," I said. "I only know how to love you and be disappointed. Those are cousins, but they don't live in the same house for long." He nodded, jaw tight. "Tell me the truth," I said. "All of it. Even the parts that make you feel foolish." He told me about the consultant promising quick cash, about meetings in bars with marble-top tables, about documents that shifted names like cards in a street trick. He told me about the morning after the so-called wedding, when he woke to find the ring on her finger and a plan he didn't remember agreeing to already penciled on the calendar. He told me he'd been too tired to argue and too hopeful to see. "Hope is holy," I said. "But it doesn't sign contracts." At 6, rain finally came, the kind that washes everything and leaves the city smelling new. We stood at the window, silent, watching drops race each other down the glass. My phone vibrated with a last message for the day: "We're not done." I typed back a single word: "Documented." "If you're still with me, tell me, would you escalate now or keep the line steady?" I kept it steady. Steady wins, even when loud thinks it's winning. Night dropped its curtain. I locked the door with the new code and put the folder under my pillow like a talisman. Paper doesn't pray, but it protects just the same. The morning began with sirens far off and the smell of rain trying to remember itself. I brewed coffee in a pot that hissed like a cat and opened my laptop. Overnight, the consultant had sent a chain of messages long enough to trip a runner. Threats dressed as advice. Predictions dressed as favors. My favorite kind of noise, because courts love to see it. I forwarded everything to Harold with the subject line "more gifts." He called 5 minutes later. They filed an emergency motion for access and relief, he said, amusement riding his voice. Hearing it too. Perfect, I said. I was worried I'd get bored. We spent the morning preparing, not dramatics, just order. Copies of the deed, the lease, the notice. The transaction log from the property account with the suspicious withdrawals highlighted like bruises. The email chain. A brief note from the smart lock vendor confirming the account holder. I printed a photo of the brownstone not because a judge needs pretty pictures, but because it reminds everyone that this is a place where people sleep and make dinner, not just a chessboard for pushy hands. At 1:30, we walked into a downtown courtroom where the air conditioning believed in winter. The opposing counsel, a young man with shiny shoes, cleared his throat as if the sound might summon authority. The consultant sat in the back row with a grin that didn't agree with his eyes. The judge, a woman with a calm face and eyebrows that said "bring facts, not theater," took the bench. "I've read your filings," she began. "Let's be efficient." Opposing counsel launched into a speech about family, expectations, contributions. He lifted his hands on certain words like he'd practiced in a mirror. "Our clients," he said, "seek only stability." "Do they seek to pay rent?" the judge asked. A pause. "There have been delays." "Do they have a signed lease with the owner?" They believed. "Belief is for church," she said, not unkind. "We're in court." Harold stood, short and surgical. He presented the deed first, then the lease, then the notice, then the bank records. Each item landed like a quiet hammer. No flourish. No sting. Just wait. The judge flipped through the papers. "And the withdrawals?" she asked, tapping the log. "Unauthorized cards linked without the owner's consent," Harold said. "We've frozen them." Opposing counsel shifted. "There is another equity partner." Harold smiled softly. "There is not." The judge leaned back. "Access will be governed by the owner's codes," she ruled. "Occupants may remain through the notice period if rent is paid in full by close of business tomorrow. Any further interference with accounts or locks will be sanctioned. Motion for emergency relief is denied." Gavel. Not a slam, more of a polite tap that still echoed. The consultant stood as if to speak and the judge didn't bother looking up. "Sit," she said. He did. Outside the courtroom, Marielle waited by the elevator with a smile carved from ice. "You'll regret embarrassing us," she hissed. "Embarrassment is wearing a size that doesn't fit," I said. "Truth is tailored." I pressed the down button. She leaned in, breath a little too sweet. "He'll choose me." I met her eyes. "I'm not asking him to choose. I'm asking the facts to." The elevator doors opened. My son stepped out, late, but there. He looked from her to me and saw two kinds of gravity. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Back at the brownstone, the rain held off like a held breath. I unlocked the door with a code that answered to my name. Inside, I set my folder on the table and poured water into a glass that had been arranged for show and finally earned its keep. "You won," my son said. "We stabilized," I corrected. "Winning is a long verb." He nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else." Of course there was. Secrets never travel alone. He told me about a signature he'd seen on a form pushed across a diner table last month. Not his. Not mine. Her name, but the handwriting didn't match. He'd noticed and said nothing because he wanted peace more than he wanted truth. I didn't scold him. I've wanted that kind of peace, too. It never lasts. "Do you still have a photo of it?" I asked. He did. He scrolled and found it, a quick snap he'd taken to remember a date. In the corner, the signature curled in a way that belonged to no one I'd met. I sent it to Harold with a line, possible forgery. Quiet inquiry? He replied 3 words, already in motion. If you're following, here's your engagement moment. Should I show my son the photo pre-ascent of the stoop, or hold it until the next move? Tell me your instinct. Mine was to hold. Not to protect her, but to protect him from an image he couldn't unsee on a day already crowded with court. As evening settled, a delivery arrived, 2 cardboard boxes addressed to the apartment with her name on them. I signed as owner, set them in the hall, and texted a neutral note, packages at door. 5 minutes later, the navy jacket man jogged up the steps to fetch them. He looked at me through the glass and gave a tiny bow that would have charmed the wrong heart. I looked back the way granite looks back at rain. After he left, I opened the window a crack and let city air roll in, bread from the corner bakery, exhaust from a bus, rain flirting with rooftops. My son washed dishes that weren't dirty just to have something to do with his hands. You going back to Savannah? He asked. Soon, I said. But not before the foundation here is set. I built it once. I can shore it up again. He dried the last glass and turned it in his hands so the light made it glow. I want to earn it, he said, voice low. Not take it. That, I told him, is the first brick. My phone buzzed one last time. A number I didn't recognize sent a single sentence, she's been meeting with a buyer. No name. No detail. Just a whisper wearing shoes. I locked the door, set the folder on the counter, and drew a breath that reached my toes. The next wave was already lifting. I could feel the pull of it in my bones, and I was ready. By morning the rain had rinsed the city clean, but the air still tasted like metal. I brewed coffee and watched steam lift like a prayer that didn't ask for anything. My son sat across from me, jaw set, eyes tired. The brownstone seemed to hold its breath. Tell me everything, I said. He did. Meetings I hadn't known about. Promises made on napkins. Late-night arguments that ended with doors slammed and plans rewritten by whoever spoke last. Each detail was a thread, and together they made a net he was finally ready to cut himself out of. Why didn't you call me? I asked. I didn't want you to think I failed, he said, voice rough. I wanted to be the kind of man you spent your life building. Strong men ask for help, I said. It's the weak who hide. He nodded, and a quiet thaw began. We were still mother and son, but we were also 2 adults on the same side of the table at last. A buzz at the door. She walked in, posture high, eyes rimmed from a night that hadn't ended well. The navy jacket man hovered on the sidewalk like a storm that hadn't decided where to break. You made us look ridiculous in court, she said. I didn't make anything, I answered. I showed what was already true. My son lifted the deed. Her name is on it, he told her, almost gently. Not mine. Not yours. She laughed, thin as paper. You think a piece of paper can stop me? It can slow you, I said. And it can protect him. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down and paled. I didn't need to see the screen to know, the bank freeze was landing. Who are you really working with? I asked. Is this about love, or a flip? She didn't answer. The silence did. Friends, if you were in my chair, would you offer a way out or let the wall stand? Drop your take below. I chose one more bridge. You can stay through the notice if the rent is paid by tomorrow, I said. No more games. No more strangers advising your life. She looked at my son, searching for footing. He didn't move. The bridge was there, whether she crossed was on her. When she left, the building relaxed. Even the radiator sighed. My son rubbed his eyes. What happens now? Now, I said, we meet the man behind the curtain. The introduction came the way trouble often does, in a hallway with poor lighting and better acoustics. I stepped outside to collect my thoughts and found him waiting by the stoop like it was a stage and he'd been called for his scene. "Name's Calder," he said, smile easy, eyes hard. "You must be the owner." "On paper and in fact," I replied. He nodded at the brownstone. "Prime asset. Could be worth double with the right touches. I help people unlock value." "I see." I folded my hands. "And how do you get paid when you unlock other people's doors?" "Win-win fee," he said. "Everyone shares the upside." "Everyone who signs," I corrected. He shrugged. "Signatures are flexible if the intent's clear." There it was, the rot dressed as opportunity. "Intent is for poets," I said. "Signatures are for court." He chuckled, tried a softer angle. "Look, your son's young. New marriages can be messy. I'm just smoothing paths." "By siphoning the property account?" I asked. He blinked. "That's a big word." "So is prosecution," I said. A beat of quiet. He shifted to threat. "You could make enemies you don't need." I smiled. "Sir, I worked night shifts for 20 years. I've already met them." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "There's a buyer interested. Private. No listing, no fuss. Cash. Think about it." "I have," I said. "And I'm keeping the house." He slid a card toward me. "A number, no title. If you change your mind." "I won't." I tucked the card into my pocket as evidence, not invitation. Back inside, I called Harold. "We have a name," I said. I gave him the details, the offer, the card. "Connected?" he asked. "Greased," I answered. "Slippery enough to fall on." "I'll run the filings," he said. "And I'll alert the DA's office informally. They like puzzles with clean edges." My son listened from the doorway, face pale but steady. "He won't stop," he said. "Then we won't either," I replied. "But we won't rush. Rushing is how hands slip." Late afternoon, a message arrived from our neighbor, Priya. "He's back." Waiting outside. Watching the door. I thanked her and sent a small heart. Community doesn't need fireworks, just a porch light and a neighbor who notices. As dusk bled into evening, the brownstone glowed warm from the inside for the first time since I'd arrived. Not staged, not stiff. Real. I set 2 plates on the table and made simple food. My son ate like a man whose nervous system had been unplugged and finally rebooted. "Tomorrow," I told him, "we move from defense to offense." "How?" "Simple," I said. "We let the law do what it's good at. And we tell the truth in a room where it's measured." We returned downtown with a new folder labeled evidence. Inside, the deed, the lease, the notice, the bank log with the flagged withdrawals, an email trail that read like a cautionary tale, and the card with Calder's number sealed in a clear sleeve. I'd also included a still from the building camera, 2 figures at the stoop, heads bent together, date and time crisp in the corner. Not salacious. Just accurate. The courtroom was cooler than yesterday. The judge the same, calm, spare, allergic to drama. Opposing counsel looked less sure of his shoes. Harold spoke first. "Your Honor, we have supplemental facts. Unauthorized access to the property account. Third-party interference with the asset. A safety concern for the owner and lawful occupant." The judge scanned the pages, eyebrow lifting a millimeter at the card in the sleeve. "And this individual?" "A self-described consultant encouraging a covert sale," Harold said. Opposing counsel rose, clearing his throat. "Speculative," he said. "Our clients seek stability, not conflict." The judge tapped the bank log. "Stability doesn't look like this." He tried again. "There were misunderstandings." "Understanding," she said, "requires evidence." She turned to us. "Requested relief?" Affirm ownership control. Restrict account access to the owner. Bar third-party attempts to market or encumber the property without written consent. Order compliance with the existing notice and payment schedule. Granted, she said, almost bored. And, counselor, inform your clients that any further attempts to circumvent ownership will be greeted with sanctions. Opposing counsel sagged. Calder, sitting in the back, kept his grin on but his eyes slipped to the floor. Then came the moment the room sharpened. The judge turned a page. There's a signature question as well? Harold nodded. Possible forgery on a prior document presented to the occupant. Do you have a specimen of the alleged signer's usual hand? Not yet, he said. We've requested copies. Then you'll get them. She signed an order for limited discovery like she was writing a recipe. We'll reconvene on that issue next week. Gavel. Again, that polite tap with teeth. Outside, the hallway smelled like copier toner and expensive cologne. She stood there, arms crossed, mask slipping. You're wrecking our life, she told my son. No, he said quietly. We were already wrecking it. We just stopped pretending. For a second, something human cracked through her anger, fear, maybe, or the grief that follows a lie that can't stand up. She turned away without another word, heels sharp on marble. Calder approached, cardless now. You like winning, he said to me. I like peace, I replied. Winning is just the road. You made an enemy today. No, I said. You made one when you touched what wasn't yours. He leaned close enough for me to smell a mint trying to hide whiskey. This isn't over. I met his eyes until he blinked. It is if you're smart. Back at the brownstone, the afternoon light found its way across the floor like forgiveness trying out the furniture. My son stood by the window, relief and shame tangled in his shoulders. You don't have to carry both, I told him. Set one down. Which one? Start with shame. He laughed, short and real. We were going to be all right, even if all right came with scars. Payment arrived before the deadline. 2 cashier's checks slid under the office door at Harold's firm with a note that tried for polite and landed on brittle. Compliance is still compliance. He deposited them and sent me the receipt. The bank confirmed the freeze held. The smart lock log showed no more midnight attempts. The email storm died to a drizzle. Even the stoop felt calmer, as if the stone itself had decided to stop entertaining nonsense. Then a small gift, copies of past documents landed in our inbox, a stack that included the form my son had described. I laid the pages side by side with a sample from a rental application she'd filled out months earlier. The 2 signatures didn't match. Not even cousins. Harold forwarded them to a handwriting examiner he trusts. Don't expect fireworks, he warned. Expect facts. That evening, neighbors passed by with dogs and grocery bags, and the brownstone finally looked like a home instead of a headline. I set the table with 2 bowls of soup and took the first spoonful standing up. Old habit from hospital nights, eat fast when you can, linger when you're safe. Are you staying? My son asked. For a few days, I said. Long enough to make sure the floor is truly steady. He nodded. After that, I want to handle the rest. That, I told him, is exactly the point. I slept with the window open and dreamed nothing for the first time in weeks. I flew home to Savannah on a morning washed in gold. The marsh looked like it had been ironed by angels. My house smelled of lemon oil and old books. I set my tote on the table and took out the manila envelope. Inside, copies of everything, stacked in the order we'd fought the storm: deed, lease, notice, bank log, emails, court orders, the card in its sleeve. I made coffee in my blue mug and sat where the light hits the table just right. The porch fan clicked its steady rhythm. Peace doesn't shout. It hums. If you've walked this far with me, here's your callback. Remember the line about respect? It isn't inherited. It's earned. Turns out it's also defended, quietly, firmly, with paper and patience. My phone buzzed. A text from my son: "I'm meeting with a counselor to sort things out. I'm also taking a budgeting class. I'll call you tonight." I smiled so hard my face hurt. I slid one last item into the envelope, a new letter from Harold I hadn't yet opened. I held it a moment, then tucked it back unopened. Not every secret needs air the minute it arrives. Some can wait for the right chapter. Out on the porch, the wind lifted the moss and the world looked honest. I took a sip and whispered to no one and everyone, "We're not powerless. We just have to remember our name is on the door."